Next up is our final speaker on the identity management block. It is Jason Law, co-founder, CTO, and chairman of blockchain identity solution provider Evernym. Jason.
Thank you. Okay, is that what I look like from behind? Thanks, I know it's after lunch and we're maybe a little groggy, but I want to share a few things. I want to talk about a model for self-sovereign identity. Now, we've heard a bit about zero-knowledge proofs and about blockchain, about tamper evidence, about consensus. There's a number of elements that go into any kind of a solution. And I'm kind of lucky because a lot of people have talked about things that I normally would talk about. Zero-knowledge proofs, for example. And Dr. Buchanan and Vasily Suvorov have mentioned those things. But you see, I have some colors up here. I'm carrying a couple of roles here. I was a co-founder of Evernym, but then Sovereign Foundation is something that kind of grew out of what we were doing, and I want to talk a little bit about that. There's some confusion sometimes about what is Sovereign and what is Indy. Indy is the code base that Sovereign contributed to the Hyperledger project under Linux Foundation. And Evernym has been helping build that since 2015. So just want to make sure the separation was understood. And I guess I can look here. I'm going to skip through a couple of slides here. We get a number of different words thrown around when we talk about identity and blockchain. And they're mostly the same. The standard I think that we're trying to achieve is something that probably follows this definition a little more closely, and that is that it's a lifetime portable identity that is fully controlled by you, and it cannot be taken away. Simply anchoring credentials to a ledger may not be enough, because if you have to go through a system that can stop you from using it, then you it's not really self-sovereign. What's exciting is a few years ago, when we started talking about self-sovereign identity, and there were others talking about it, there were not very many of us, and we felt like weirdos. We'd bring things up, and we'd have people looking at us a little, they squint at us and blink at us a couple of times. But it's exciting to see that it's kind of taken off, and to hear the projections in this space are it's fortuitous. So I want to talk about a model, and there's 3 different dimensions to this model, and I have pictures, so it'll be a little more clear when I show them. There's 3 dimensions, and the first is relationships. And let's say that I've met someone here, and I've talked to them about maybe where I'm from, and we've exchanged some stories. They know more about me, but I met someone over here, and maybe someone over here doesn't know the same stories. In real life, we don't have one identity. Internally, we might think of ourselves as having one identity, but to others, we have multiple facets. And so it's important to think, when we build systems, that the systems should model what happens in real life. And so one of the first things we kind of realized was that having one identifier was actually very harmful. And you'll kind of see how we can have a strong identity without having correlatable identifiers and correlation handles in general. Attributes, we all have attributes. We all have things that we know about ourselves, that we have other people say about us. We want to be able to share those the way we want to. And agents, I think Vasily mentioned agents. This has become a critical part of infrastructure, and we don't realize it, but we all use agents all the time, but we don't think about it. And so we're going to bring that up to the surface here. So the very first one we're going to talk about is relationships. I talk about identity with a capital I versus identity with a little I. And identity with a little I is really contextual. Who I am to my children, in fact, who I am to each of my children is very different, even though they may be in the same room with me for a lot of the time that I'm with them. Who I am to my family, to my bank to my employer are all very different. And we need to treat those as different identities. The second dimension is attributes. This is information about me that I hold, that I can share, things that people know about me. And the last one is agents. And you see the direction of these. You can kind of imagine if these are mutually orthogonal dimensions, then they can create, you can imagine them in a three-dimensional space, which is kind of where my head goes. But before I show you that, I want to show that I can't digitally sign anything. You give me a piece of paper and a pen, and I'll sign something, no problem. But I can't compute a signing algorithm. I can't store a private key in my head. I couldn't verify one. And so we all talk about Alice and Bob having keys, but they don't have any keys. What Alice and Bob have are something like this that holds a key, that computes, or that computes a signature or verifies a signature. And so making these first-class citizens in an identity model was very important. And then the last one is a cloud agent, which is an interesting concept. Right now, when we use cloud services, we're using somebody else's services. They put an interface on it for us. When I send a message, usually I send a message that goes through a server that someone else owns. They promise not to look, or they promise to secure it. Yeah, there can be some mechanisms for me ensuring that is secure going through their servers, but I'm still going through their servers, and having a way that I have my own ability to control what happens in the cloud is quite intriguing, and there's some neat use cases for it. So here's the X, Y, and Z space, the three-dimensional space, and we're going to talk a little bit about the intersection of the planes between these, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. So Vasily talked about this a little bit, the concept of me being able to, well, let me talk about just a general high level, and then we'll go into the details. This plane is who knows what about me. The next plane is which proxy or which agent represents me and in which context and how. And lastly, which proxy can share what information about me. So you can see each of the planes kind of pull out the, in this case, relationships is pulled out, but the combination of the three create a fairly rich landscape for control for an individual. When I say individual, I mean individuals or entities, companies, whoever needs to maintain a self-sovereign identity. So I want to dig into this one a little bit, and I think this will make it more clear. These lines up above represent a different relationship that I have, and I'm employed by Acme. And Acme knows some things about me. It knows my name. It knows a lot of things about me, but I'm simplifying it. It knows my name, my role in the company, my salary, my start date. And this example is I want to go get a loan. So my employer can give me a credential. And a credential is a collection of attributes that are signed by that employer. But they're signed in a way that I can prove that I have a signature and prove the contents of that credential without actually revealing the signature. Because a signature, like a hash, is universally unique and is a correlation handle. So I want to get a loan with UBS, and I get to, using zero-knowledge proofs, prove my name and my salary without actually needing to reveal the credential itself. And so that's why I've painted these with a different symbol. So let's talk about another plane here. Here I've got UBS Bank. I'm actually maybe a customer of UBS now. And that line represents the intersection of all of my agents with UBS. Now, not all of my agents need to be part of the relationship with UBS. But let's say, for example, my phone is. So my phone has a key, and this is how UBS knows it's me, because I can sign my communications with little a, the private key, and UBS knows that it's me. And let's say I also want to use my notebook. We don't share private keys across devices, so I have a separate key for that one. And I have a separate key for perhaps a cloud agent, because maybe when I have a mobile phone and a notebook, because I have in Sovereign, you have a pairwise relationship, you have an asynchronous secure communication channel between the two parties, which means that I can get messages from UBS Bank on the same channel. It's a bidirectional channel. But if I'm using my mobile phone and my notebook, and my mobile phone is maybe out of battery and my notebook is switched off, then I'm out of luck. And so maybe I have a cloud agent that represents me with the bank for certain things. Maybe it's just to allow me to get messages when I'm offline. I think it can be much more than that, but this is a simple example. So I think Vasily also mentioned microledgers. Microledgers are interesting because they're very small, tamper-evident ledgers with a consensus of one, if you will. Only one author on this ledger, which is me, and I have one ledger, microledger, per relationship. And here you can see that I am putting these keys, A, B, and C, are on my microledger, and I share this with UBS. UBS gets a copy of it, and I have a way to communicate that microledger to UBS, so UBS knows if I change my key. And then I added key C, and if you can see, key C actually has a message proxy. It's actually, I'm telling UBS, don't trust this agent or this key for anything but message proxying. So send a message to that, but don't actually trust it for anything else. And with my banking app, I may have a higher level protocol that allows me to authorize payments. And so maybe I say that B, because it's my notebook, and my notebook, I leave it in my office all the time, or my kids use it, then maybe I don't trust it as much as I would maybe my mobile phone. And so I can have an ability to say, hey, UBS, B can authorize up to $100. And A, you can, anything over $100. In fact, anything period. I'm giving kind of a little bit of a complex example to show that you can do fine-grained authorization of agents for a relationship. And you can imagine any kind of protocol could run on top of this and could leverage this as kind of a dynamic, self-sovereign access control list per relationship. Okay, thanks. This one's better. So let's talk about the last one. I'll go quickly through this, and I think we're doing good on time. So I've got my four agents here: a mobile phone, a notebook, an iPad, and a cloud agent. I labeled these W, X, Y, Z. And if you remember, agents and attributes plane is all about which agents are allowed to share what data about me. And there's two layers to this. First layer is if I have a phone that has my credentials on it, and I don't want another device to be able to prove something from that credential, then I don't share it with that other device. That's one layer, and there's a simple way to do that. But the second layer, which I think is a little more interesting, is about recovery. When I go self-sovereign, I put keys on my device that allow me to prove things, and I no longer have some of the protections. And so I have to have a really good decentralized key management system. I've got to have a way to be able to let someone else trust that it's really me and not someone who's taken my phone. So having the ability to have some sophisticated policy around recovery and key rotation and things like that is important. Now, of course, we don't want to burden a user with all of that information and make them have to make those hard decisions. So it's up to the apps, and this is going to be something that's really important over the next few years, is the apps need to help the user be smart about security and about recovery and everything related to that. So here with agents and attributes, you have a policy, and in Sovereign, you can do this in several different ways, and you could do this in Ethereum too, but in Sovereign, we have what's equivalent to a smart contract that allows you to build a policy around your agents, and you have one per identity with a capital I. So one entity or one person would have one of these. And you can see that this is authorizing W, X, and Y, which are my edge agents, to prove something. And so now when I issue a zero-knowledge proof of my credentials, I'm actually showing, I'm actually proving that I'm doing it from one of these devices. And I'm doing that in zero knowledge so that it can't be correlated to a particular identity on a ledger. Number two, I can set a policy, something more sophisticated, like if I'm going to grant provisioning of new agents, I'm going to need two of those three devices to come together and do some sort of a multi-sig. And this is just an example, just to kind of illustrate what's possible with this model. I add a third one, Z, which is a cloud agent. Remember, cloud agents are agents that are not in your control. They still have keys, they're still authorized by you, but we might trust them less. And so we call them maybe semi-trusted. And so, but I would trust Z to participate in a revocation. So I lost my phone a few months ago. I was in Groningen, Netherlands, and I flew to Southend, London, and I left it in the back of my seat back. And I spent, I don't know, 2-3 hours cumulatively calling the airports, calling the airline, and I never recovered it. And of course it's unlocked because I'm here and I'm using SIM cards in Europe. And I was very frustrated. But if I'm using that for my identity, then I want the ability to use my other devices or even other people to help me revoke that so that someone can impersonate me with that device. And I have to do that without being able to reach the device. Because a smart person is going to turn off the network, they're gonna take their time, they're gonna hack it, and then they're gonna be very selective about how they use it. So this kind of a policy allows you to have comfort in that scenario. And just one note about diffuse trust. What makes blockchain powerful is the notion of diffuse trust, that it takes a number of people to cooperate, to collude, in fact, too many people to collude to create a problem. And so pushing diffuse trust out to the edge, diffuse trust can live everywhere, and pushing it to the edge is a very powerful way to do it. And so in an M of N type scenario, it's helpful there. And then of course, I lost my phone, so I have a new transaction here to revoke W, so W is no longer able to prove on my behalf. So I probably went a little deep on this, but I just wanted to illustrate that the model needs to support all three dimensions and all three planes. And this is a work in process. This feels good. This has been a model we've been working against for a long time. But if this sounds like it's wrong, like there's something missing, I'd like to hear about it. And I have my contact information at the bottom, at the last slide. I want to talk more about it because I want to challenge what we've done, and I'm happy with this, but I want to challenge it. Just one more note on agents. It's we've talked a lot about at this conference about IoT and things like self-driving cars. Agents can be anything that we want. You can think of agents as being anything. My home security system is an agent. My doorbell can be an agent. My car. My wife can be an agent, or at least one of her keys can be an agent for authorizing high-risk transactions. She says it's for my protection, but I really know she's keeping an eye on my financial transactions. My friend for key recovery. my friend knows me, and I can call him, and I can talk to him, and he can judge whether or not it's really me much better than maybe a simple password verification. My attorney, I could authorize my attorney to do certain things, or my realtor. And so you can imagine this, the use cases that can sit on top of a model like this. My partner is common. He would say things like, your agent is like your Jarvis. And I love this concept. I love the idea of having something that's kind of watching out for me, that doesn't work for someone else, that works for me, and can help me participate in collective intelligence in a commercial way without exposing who I am and all of my details. I love that idea. The project's been going, and I skipped over some slides up at the top. It's taken off. The last 18 months have been crazy. I want to thank a few people that have kind of contributed to this, and then tell you how you could participate. Crypto Valley Association, of course, Hyperledger and Linux Foundation. I love what these guys did. They pushed us, because we are taking a strong stance on privacy. They really wanted to get our project in, and I'm really glad we did, because they've offered a lot of support. I want to shout out to Jan Kamenisch. He's here in Zurich, and his team at IBM. IBM is a founding steward of Sovereign, and Jan's work has been instrumental, absolutely instrumental, because it's paved the way for the privacy that we needed to have in order to do something like this. If we didn't have that work, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So I want to thank him and his team. Thank Vasily Suvorov for asking the really hard questions. SICPA is here. I ran into SICPA. They're a steward, and they're doing great work, and grateful that Cisco was able to announce yesterday that they're a steward. And also, we're doing a few things. Alex Prukshot with SSI Meetup. I want to talk a little bit about kind of a broader initiative around SSI. I'll do that in just a second. If you're interested, go to Hyperledger Indy. Also, Sovereign. You can participate in a working group. There's a technical governance board that I chair that if you'd like to participate, let me know. W3C Verifiable Claims Working Group is, in fact, let me just talk about that. We have a pull request right now that's going into the spec. It's not a spec yet, it's not finished yet, but we think this year we'll have it. But the pull request is turning verifiable credentials into zero-knowledge proof friendly verifiable credentials. It's exciting to see that happen, because it's been a lot of work to kind of create awareness and get people really thinking about why zero-knowledge proofs are so important in blockchain applications. Decentralized Identity Foundation, we participate on that, and that's a good place. Uport's a member, and Microsoft, and some other big ones are a member of that. SSI Meetup is brand new. We're trying to, I'm helping try to get this started a bit, but it's really kind of ledger agnostic. Let's find people that are doing stuff in the space, and let's learn from each other. There's so much tremendous opportunity in the space that you got to have an abundance mentality, that there's so much to do, and there's so much work to do, and there's starting to be convergence on the right kinds of ideas, the good ideas, and I think we all benefit when we come together and we learn from each other. So I'm excited that this is happening, and then it's a little bit early, but we're starting to talk about a common protocol, something like SMTP for self-sovereign identity. I think this is a pretty positive notion that a number of the players, including Uport and VerisOne and the DIF, people at the DIF are all starting to talk about a common protocol. So this really helps us all, and it's exciting to see that happening. So I think I'm a little bit early, and I was kind of running fast, but here's my info. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my email address, and then I won't respond. And then 2 weeks later, I'll finally respond. Maybe I'll give you the evernym.com and sovereign.org addresses, but would love to have your participation. Thanks.